Joining me now, prosecutorial attorney and legal analyst, Wendy Patrick. Wendy, thank you so much for joining me. Wendy, what do you make of this? Should Biden be receiving intelligence briefings? A lot of people say that since he's not receiving these right now, that it is a threat to our national security.
Well, remember, we have a president now in the country. So to say that nobody's keeping an eye on national security would be to be ignoring what President Trump has been doing for the last 3.5 years. But the question on whether Joe Biden should also be receiving briefings, that is something that's becoming hotly debated. And there is good reason that people are saying, look, we can't declare him the winner when he's not officially the winner. In fact, Joe Biden himself was the one that said, hey, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's wait till all the votes are counted and the election results are certified. So he's now sort of arguing the polar opposite, that let's pretend as if. I mean, maybe he does have the votes, but the fact that news organizations have declared him the winner doesn't make him the winner for the purpose of being entitled as a matter of law to those briefings. Now, I've been following the news as you have, Stephanie. I understand that his legal team, just like the president's legal team, are weighing their options to see how they can facilitate this. We may be hearing more about this in the next couple of weeks, but you can see there's equities on both sides at this point to say, why don't we just wait until the vote is officially counted and a president is officially decided?
There is some question on whether or not that would violate the Logan Act. That is, he's been taking phone calls from world leaders. Obviously, these calls aren't being monitored. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting. Secretary Pompeo was asked that same question because everybody wants to talk about the Logan Act when we're not exactly sure what kind of conversations are going on with foreign leaders. Now, we can imagine perhaps there's simply meet and greets and nothing more than that, no substance. In fact, they shouldn't be substantive because the world leaders no doubt follow the news just like Americans and understand that it's not going to be till December till we actually have a president declared. So it's probably premature to suppose that it's violating that act. But Stephanie, we have to look at that through the lens of what we've been dealing with for the last couple of years, at least the allegations of what was going on in other parts of the world. So let's just say we hope for the best, that those haven't been violated. And we hope that world leaders haven't inadvertently attempted to violate the Logan Act, perhaps not knowing exactly what it allows.
Yeah, and I'm not suggesting that the Logan Act has been violated here, but I'm pointing out the hypocrisy and how they treated the former National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, who had conversations, versus how they're treating Biden in this. So again, I mean, the hypocrisy is astounding.
Absolutely, Stephanie. And, you know, you bring up a really good point in terms of hypocrisy is we have to look at what would be going on if the tables were turned and looking at what went on immediately after the last election in 2016. And before we come down too hard on the president wanting to take this battle from the Situation Room into the courtroom, imagine that the same thing went on back then. Is we want to make sure both sides value election integrity and everybody believes every vote should count, every legal vote. So what's wrong with letting the process play itself out?
And I'm sure you've had a chance to look at some of these cases in some of the various states from the Trump team. What do you think President Trump's team's strongest cases, legally speaking, when it comes to voter fraud?
Their strongest case, legally speaking, is following up on the irregularities that are stunning and perhaps point to illegalities. Think about it. A vote count total is only as good as the way it was counted. So it does us no good to simply talk about numbers without taking a closer look at how did we come up with those numbers? Why would we have numbers flipping in the middle of the night? Why would we have the kinds of evidence, and I'll use that word because that's the word that everybody uses in the court of public opinion, that there might be something to investigate? We can't say these lawsuits are meritless. That's not for the court of public opinion. That's for a court of law. And that is where this legal battle will go. So Pennsylvania, just looking at the numbers and where they say they have affidavits and witnesses, Pennsylvania, Nevada, Michigan, the states that no doubt are also the states that are in question. These are places where they basically found things that they want to investigate. And why shouldn't they? I mean, this is on a going forward basis, not only about the president, but about precedent, about setting precedent on best practices in ballot counting. We certainly didn't do that this election.
Yeah, and I believe, according to the polls here, 70% of Republicans believe that this was not a free and fair election. How important is it that the voters are shown that this was a free and fair election?
It's so important, Stephanie, because look at the massive voter turnout that we saw this time. I mean, we had people voting from home because they were afraid of COVID. We had people coming out to the polls even on election day. And that's important because those people would be dissuaded from participating in the political process if they didn't believe their votes counted. So it is integral that we get to the bottom of some of these irregularities. Nobody is disputing that there are irregularities. Where the dispute comes in is, well, does that make it fraudulent? Are there enough votes that would tell the difference? Is it intentional? Is it inadvertent? Whatever the answers to those questions are, it's no substitute for finding out. That's important, as you point out, to the American voter.
Yeah, and so many people, including the president, were concerned about voter fraud going into this election, especially amid a pandemic and all of these changes that happen during this process, the mandatory mail-in ballots. There was a lot to be concerned about. And then we've seen so many examples of actual voter fraud. That can't be ignored. The dead people voting, that happened. Poll watchers being denied access, that happened. There's video of it. There's pretty solid proof and evidence. So a lot of these questions need to be answered, that's for sure. Well, Wendy, we're totally out of time. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie.